All right. Let's see here. There we go. So I would say the title of this one is Your Online Research is Disqualifying. My name is Timothy Cornelius. I'm Director of Audience Operations at Question Pro. You just heard from me about instant answers if you were lucky enough to be here. The agenda for this talk for the next 20, 30 minutes or so is life conditions I've been blind to, mistakes I've made in sampling and how you can avoid them, and solutions that I've personally implemented. So I started out at Gartner, where I learned of research companies in various areas of space. I then I found a little startup named Lucid, and they were hiring in my hometown of New Orleans. So I went there and learned about the best and the worst as it pertains to sampling. And you could see who was doing it right and who was doing it wrong. And then I moved over to Question Pro, and I saw a whole new side of the business where you could see where the respondent is hitting a roadblock or having any issues. So that's what made me start P3, and I'll get into that here in a second. So there was a quote at Lucid in our big auditorium. I think maybe they call it the aquarium. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So let's open up our minds for a second here. So let's meet Ariel. She's 36 years old. She's a female, California resident. She hit all of my standard qualifications, but she was born deaf. I had a survey where I had we were ad testing or pilot, and Ariel listened or watched the video and was answering a red herring question on the video, but that video did not have closed captions by default. There was no back button. There was no way that she could answer the survey at all. So I chatted with her the whole night. I was asking her, what is your survey experience like? What does it feel like being you in your shoes, in your world? Well, it did not feel good. I got a talking to over chat. She was 15 minutes late to pick up her kids from school. I wasted 15 minutes of her time. It was an awful experience for her. And I set out to change that and to form P3 Technology, to partner with Question Pro to be able to help the survey experience, not for just those who are able. So here's what it looked like. Me, the French horn, screaming at Ariel, please, please take my survey, please answer my questions. And her just standing there being like, I don't know what you want me to do. You're discriminating against me. So let's change the way we think. Current screening processes isolate those with lower education, socioeconomic status, certain ethnicities, and especially those with disabilities. Let's look at some of the worst offenders. The ADA homepage. The ADA homepage has 164 different inaccessible pieces of content on the homepage. So don't feel bad if you're starting from like I was and didn't have a clue what you didn't know. So from there, if the ADA can't do it, how can we do it, right? So let's learn. The EU equivalent is just as bad. Readability scores, graphics, alt text, it's terrible. So about Tim. I have done 4.8 million interviews I directly managed that were not accessible. I'm not proud of that, but it's where I am. 6 is the number of times it took me to get a passing grade in college algebra. This number is out of date. I've had 8 eye surgeries. And, I've got one single purpose, and it's to lead with love and make the world a more equitable and accessible place. I've done 4.8 at 7-minute LOI, because we're all research nerds here. That's 339,600,000 wasted minutes of human life. Actually, that's 33,600,000. Pretty bad at math. Told you that. Currently, consent is assumed. When you are putting your intro to a survey, and the language that you have there is not very, I would say, not very accessible to many people. And by default, a lot of companies have templates where it says, "Hi, my name is X. I'm from this company. There's no harm with this survey. Contact me if there's an issue," type of thing. Let's go to one that I took personally when I was doing a survey. As a result of being selected, blah, 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 confidentiality of all the aforementioned information, blah, 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 IP address, blah, blah, blah. Let's see here. So using the readability calculator, you can see all of the different scores that you have. The Fleisch reading score, Gunning Fogg, Fleisch Kincaid, Coleman Liao, Smog Index. There's 7 different calculations. A lot of them are saying that you have to be a college graduate or above. It's extremely difficult to read, a college graduate, or a senior in high school. Let's dig into why that is not okay. Let's look at the educational attainment by race. The percentage of Americans that have less than a high school diploma is 8.9%. So 8.9% of people who go through that survey do not know what they just agreed to. Here's education rates by sex, by race, the low end to the high end. And what that means is these are the percentage of population that do not have a high school diploma or a GED. So these numbers are at minimum the percentages of people that you are leaving out of your study. We'll get to this in a second, but the Hispanic population is the #1 growing ethnicity in the United States. And you're leaving out 35.7%. Man, that was hard for me to look in the mirror. I don't know about you. Here's by nativity, bachelor's degree, to be able to read the consent. Let's talk about inclusivity. 1 in 4 people experience a disability in the United States. Not all disabilities are visual. Some people have issues internally and in the brain. Let's talk about why it's important for you as a researcher or a marketer. Disabled people have $490 billion in disposable income to buy your goods, to vote with their dollars for you. Discretionary income after you've paid everything and you are just looking for things to buy to make yourself happy, make your life better. $21 billion still left out there. Well, go get it. Pick it up. 73% of disabled people experience barriers to accessing your website. That's huge. Again, not all disabilities are visible. Here's a list of a lot of the disabilities that you have to consider when building a survey. Let's talk about vision issues. You can go to Lighthouse, fortworth.org, vision simulator, to see what it looks like if you had cataracts or glaucoma or anything like that, and see the content of your survey. So mistakes I've made, like I said earlier, not defaulting to closed caption. Auto advance should be when you answer the question, the next question populates. That should be enabled by default, because that helps people with upper limb mobility issues. Self-first thinking. If it's not happening to me, then it's not happening. That's very selfish and something that I've been working on. Zoom translations are not accurate. We are a global company, and if you put on Zoom captions, you are not able to understand anyone who has a accent. Key themes of the Hispanic acculturation, red herring questions are very discriminatory. Let's see the next one. So here is the market spending of the largest growing segment of America. Remember when you were disregarding 34.7% up to that? They have $1.28 trillion to spend. So when I think about this question, although this is a standard qualification from most suppliers and respondents, I've gotten some feedback that this should be Latinx because there are people that are identifying as different genders. It gets kind of murky when you think about the language is very masculine and feminine, but we can get into that another time. These are the different countries that of origin of Spanish speakers. You see that little box that says other? Let's dig into that other box. What about Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Honduras, Paraguay, and Uruguay? If you're leaving all of those out, you're leaving out 8.6% of the population, 5.4 million people. That is way more than the population of Los Angeles. The Dominican Republic is closer than I am to Miami. So you should leave me out if you're going to leave someone out. I love this meme. Do you know how frustrating it is to have to translate everything in my head before I say it? Do you even know how smart I am in Spanish? This is the sentiment that I feel like whenever I have a survey that I visually cannot see. I really want to give my opinion. I really want to vote. Every survey is your chance to vote. And if you can't vote, it's really scary world that we can live in. And I want to be a part where everyone's heard, in a world where everyone's heard. So solutions in closing, let's change the way we think. Dan did the masterclass here. With Question Pro, you're able to script against the geo variable IP, and you can say that's Miami with a self-identified zip code, county of origin, the Hispanic acculturation origin should be Dominican Republic, And the majority of the language spoken at home is 50% Spanish. Then you can ask questions around culture significance, around male and female gender considerations. The valuable 500 is encouraging the development of digital technologies to support people with disabilities. Let's talk about some of the ways that they're able to help out. So, Seeing AI, it's a smartphone camera that audio describes everything around you. Google Action Blocks. It's kind of like the jitterbug for someone who is blind. It says, call this person, go here, do this, play music, things like that. Zoom transcripts. I said they're a little bit problematic, but they're always improving. It's the best thing about software. Android voice access. This helps people with motor disabilities. You can control the device with your voice, so the upper limb mobility individuals that I was speaking about earlier. And I would really encourage you to involve someone with various backgrounds from the beginning, because you don't know what you don't know. Inclusive design, nothing about them without them. Don't observe the condition. You have to live in the person's world, in the world of those who love them. I can't tell you how important this is. If you are looking for someone to audit your surveys, there are vocational programs federally funded that are free to you to have someone who is disabled make an hourly wage, and the government will subsidize that. So there's no reason why you shouldn't go through the vocational office of your state. Tom Brady doesn't ask a running back for permission to make decisions. You have to own your own personal standard of inclusivity. Whether you are brand new, whether you've been doing this for 190,000 years, you have to own up and say, hey, I'm not going to avoid them anymore. I'm going to include as many people as I can. And from my work with Question Pro and P3, I have found that it is a lot more cost effective to involve these populations at the beginning than to go back. The social cost is incredible, as well as the economic costs. So the last quote that I would give you is from Maya Angelou. Once you know better, do better. That is a summation of that quote. Now that you know a few things, let's have a conversation and let's talk about, how can you reach certain populations? It's not just about your reach. It's not a supply and a buy problem. I think that it really transitions into this is something we haven't considered before. So let's start thinking about it because it's affecting everything that we do. Thank you for watching. I'm always able to talk about it. If you have any questions, you can find me on LinkedIn. My email is timothy.cornelius@questionpro.com. And let's just do better. Thanks, guys and gals and everyone else.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. That was really interesting. I like that you put a number, like an economic number behind it, because I think that's what will get people listening, right? It's not, I think everybody says, yeah, inclusion is important, but oftentimes, unless there's like an economic incentive to it, unfortunately, people don't listen. So I thought that was interesting how you put those numbers to it. What are some good, I know you mentioned a few good starting points, but is when someone creates their survey, do you recommend they run it through some of those different checks that you mentioned ahead of time? Or I think largely it's sort of an afterthought, right? But now, as you mentioned, make it as part of your process. So is it as simple as that, of making it as one of those checklist items before they send out their survey?
So I wouldn't say that it's simple, but I would say that, trust it to the experts. And if you're not an expert, give it to somebody who is until you can learn from them. And I know that our managed service team, as well as myself, can help you put these surveys together and find out what you can ask legally, socially, things like that.
Got it. And I know Question Pro took a lot of time and made our surveys super accessible for respondents as well. So kind of reverse engineered it, thinking about people with disabilities, special needs, and so forth. So we have done a lot on that front as well. A few questions came in. The first one is, what are some excuses that you hear agencies giving to not making surveys accessible? Do you hear any good excuses or reasons why they don't do it?
Yeah. There's a lot of researchers out there who don't take their own surveys. So I think it's a time constraint.
Right.
I think this is the way we've always done things. And that is pretty much a cancer for your research. The biggest issue that I've come across, and at first I didn't know how to handle it, was I had a CPG, one of the largest CPGs, come to me and ask, look, we've been running this tracker for 10 years, and you're telling me that we're leaving out this much, potentially this much of the population. And I said, yeah, watch this. And I showed them one of the emulators, and I took their survey with them on the line and showed that there was absolutely no way to finish the survey with the conditions that they had. And I walked them through different emulators, and I showed them, these are the people that you're missing. So it's that's the biggest challenge that I've come up with is, the people who say, it's a tracking study, I can't change that. Look at the census from the 1920s and 30s. You will be embarrassed at our history about different types of demographics that we asked and different questions. So if the census is wrong, and that's, our country's longest tracking survey,
sure.
It's okay. You can change.
And you're changing for the better too, right? Not a mistake that someone made or something happened. Like you're changing for the better, getting more inclusive. Another question that came up is the need for respondents more important than the need for equality?
It's a great question. No, I would take 10% great quality than I would 90% poor quality. I think a smaller sample size where you are incentivizing at a higher rate is more important than, having the bulk numbers. So whether you have 4,000, just programmatic answers, or you have 400 deeply profiled respondents, I think that you're going to have better insight.
Do you think it's a situation in general around this, or even you showed the ADA website and they're not, they're not fully compliant at all. Is it a matter of being 100% compliant or more compliant than you currently are, if that makes sense?
So I would say that's a starting point. The type of accessibility that we use as a company, first it started out with, hey, we got to make sure that the ADA guidelines are covered, and then we got to make sure that the world guidelines are covered. And then we decided, hey, we've got to do even more than that. And then we kind of just sat back and we're like, oh crap, we've got to make this better. So if the ADA, it's a starting point. That's a summation, and the ADA is the minimum that you need to do from your website.
Got it. Makes sense. And then, kind of a final question, even around, you had that big list of, countries, I think in South America, or, you mentioned all of those. What sort of ways, is it a matter of identifying the problem and then obviously figure out solutions for it? But I'm thinking, that's a long list of additional countries to include. Is it practical? What would you say to that? Like, am I going to make sure that I get a certain percentage of this audience for each one of those, or can I just loop them in all together? Like, What would you say to that for maybe if budgets are constrained or different things of that nature that kind of restrict you from that getting all of those different regions in your survey?
Yeah, I would say, if you want to start disqualifying people, then you can start with, let's kick all males out of surveys. I think it's just as important to
Mm-hmm.
get those groups of people, and if you can't get them, find someone who can.
Mm.
Partner with someone if they're not in your community or with your sample partners. Then find someone who can get them. There's a lot of Hispanics and other people that have immigrated to the United States that don't have bank accounts. So when they get paid, they can't get a debit card. Like it's just, and if you can't get a debit card, you have a phone that has really spotty internet access.
Right.
And it's just hard to get those people. We're not going out with clipboards anymore, for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hopefully not.
That too. I'm going to show up and knock on your door one of these days.
Make sure you have an offline device from Question Pro, okay?
Yeah, right. That
Awesome.
iPad Mini.
iPad, there you go. I'll take that. Awesome. Hey, Tim, thanks so much. If people have questions for Tim, contact him. He's always up for conversations, I know, around this subject or anything. So, Tim, thanks so much for your presentation today. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, everybody.